The word landed soft as a thrown stone. A shed with delusions. Reed Halpert smiled at his own line, waiting for the team behind him to laugh. Most of them did. Holden Marsh stood in the doorway of the small house he had built with his own hands, fingers resting lightly on the cedar frame. He did not move. Cordelia Vance stood half a step behind Halpert and saw something in Holden's eyes that made her breath catch. Then the gravel cracked. The first black Suburban rounded the bend, then another, and another. Halpert turned. The line did not stop. 6 hours earlier, Pinecrest Hollow had been a town the rest of Vermont kept forgetting on purpose. 2,000 people. One stoplight. The kind of quiet that came from being left alone for a long time. The tiny house sat at the edge of a spruce stand, half a mile up an unpaved road that did not show on most maps. It was 320 square feet of black-stained cedar, with a steel chimney and a small porch that faced east. Holden Marsh had built it the summer after his wife died. He had finished the last shingle in October and slept inside that same night. Now the kettle on the propane stove had begun to whistle. Holden lifted it before it could climb. He poured water through a mocha pot already loaded with ground coffee, watched the dark seep up, and set 2 mugs on the counter without turning. Behind him, his daughter sat on a low bench by the window, working a wooden comb through her hair. The comb had belonged to her mother. Riley used it every morning. She was 8. Pancakes or oatmeal, Holden said. Pancakes. You said pancakes yesterday. That's because they were good yesterday. He almost smiled. He set a cast-iron pan on the stove and reached for the flour. Down in town, the bell over the door of the Birch Inn jingled at 8:40. Cordelia Vance stepped through with a leather duffel and a navy wool coat that did not belong in a town where most people wore Carhartt. 2 associates and 1 junior analyst followed her. The innkeeper, a woman in her 60s named June, slid 4 keys across the counter without asking for names. She had been told to expect them. Cordelia carried her bag up the narrow stairs, sat at the small desk under the eaves, and opened a file labeled Marshfield Holdings Parcel 7B Acquisition Target. 12,000 acres. Conservation easement attached. A handwritten initial on every other page that she had not yet learned to read. At 9:15, she walked into the Hollow Diner alone. She wanted coffee that did not come from an inn carafe. She was holding a paper cup with one hand and a phone with the other when her elbow caught the edge of a salt shaker. The cup tipped. Hot coffee bloomed across the wooden counter and onto the cuff of her coat. A napkin appeared in her hand before she registered the man holding it. He was tall, a little gray at the temples, wearing a wool shirt the color of bark. He had already mopped most of the spill before she could speak. "Thank you," she said. "It happens." He passed her a second napkin and went back to his counter seat without waiting for more. A girl was sitting next to him on a swivel stool, watching Cordelia with calm, level eyes. "My dad fixes everything," the girl said. It was not a boast. It was a fact she had decided to share. Cordelia looked at the man again. He did not look up. She nodded at the girl, thanked the napkin holder one more time, and carried her coffee to a booth by the window. Behind the register, an older woman in a pale blue cardigan watched the whole sequence without moving. Maggie Whitlow had been town clerk for 29 years. She knew exactly who had just wiped coffee off whose sleeve. She did not speak. She only kept watching. The site visit was scheduled for 2 o'clock. Reed Halpert arrived early in a black Range Rover, a survey crew in 2 pickup trucks behind him, and a man from the county planning office riding shotgun. He stepped out, smelled the air, made a face, and walked up the gravel drive like a man inspecting a property he already owned. Cordelia and her 2 associates followed at a measured distance. Devon Pryor, the youngest of the 3, brought up the rear with a binder pressed to his chest. Halpert stopped 15 feet from the porch. "This is the structure," he said to no one in particular. He gestured. "This is what we are paying 12,000 acres of premium frontage to clear off our books." He laughed once, short, a shed with delusions. The survey crew laughed. The planning officer did not. Cordelia held her face still. Halpert was not her client. Halpert was the public face of the buyer. Her job was to close the parcel. Her job was not to flinch. "He's still the squatter on title," Halpert went on. "Caretaker, whatever they're calling him now. Get him out, and we cut a check." Holden was already in the doorway. He had heard every word. He looked at Halpert the way a man looks at weather he has been expecting for a long time. Cordelia walked up the steps alone. She held the acquisition summary in both hands. She had drafted half of it herself. "Mr. Marsh," she said, "I'm with Vance Capital. I was asked to give you formal notice of the pending sale. You can keep this copy. There's a 30-day window for any objection through counsel." He took the document. He thanked her. He read. She watched him turn the pages. He was not skimming. He stopped on page 11. He read it twice. Then he lifted his eyes. "Section 4.2, subsection C," he said. His voice was low, almost gentle. "It contradicts the reversionary clause in the original easement, executed in 2008. The trust cannot dispose of this parcel without supermajority approval from the founding trustees, and the supermajority requires me." He said it the way other people said the time. Cordelia did not move. The paper in her hand had become very specific in her fingers. She felt every fiber of it. "I'm sorry," she said. "Could you say that again?" He did not say it again. He folded the document in half, set it on the cedar railing, and stepped back from the doorway. "You're welcome to file at the town clerk's office," he said. "Mrs. Whitlow has the original on record." Halpert was at the bottom of the steps now, his color climbing. He took Cordelia by the elbow, not gently, and turned her back toward the trucks. "He's bluffing," Halpert said under his breath. "He's a handyman with a Wikipedia page open. Don't humor him." He cited the subsection number. Anyone can cite a number. She did not answer. Behind them, Holden stepped into the tiny house and closed the door. Down at the bottom of the gravel road, where the dirt met the county route, something black slid into view. A Suburban. The headlights cut through the afternoon haze like a slow knife. Another came behind it, then another. The line kept arriving. 50 Suburbans. Cordelia counted them later when she could think again. 50 black SUVs, identical, with consecutive plates registered to a fleet leasing company in Hartford. They parked in a column that stretched all the way back to the county route, engines off, doors closing in a quiet rhythm that sounded almost rehearsed. The first man out wore a charcoal overcoat and no tie. He walked straight up the gravel drive without looking at anyone except the tiny house. He stopped at the foot of the steps and inclined his head. "Chairman Marsh." The door opened. Holden stood in the threshold with a coffee mug in his hand, the same wool shirt, the same quiet face. He nodded once. "Mr. Auberg." "Sir, I'm sorry to arrive without warning. We tried the satellite phone. It's in a drawer." "Yes, sir." More people were stepping out of the cars now. 3 women in suits. A lawyer Cordelia recognized from a federal court docket she had read in law school, the general counsel of one of the largest land trusts in North America. 2 security people in plain coats, a young aide carrying a leather folio with an embossed monogram on the cover. Cordelia did not move. She had the strange sense that the ground under her boots had changed temperature. Reed Halpert had gone very still. His mouth was open by a quarter inch. The survey crew had stopped pretending to look at their clipboards. The man called Auberge climbed 2 steps and lowered his voice. Cordelia caught only fragments. Emergency. 48 hours. Liquidation motion. 3 trustees flipped. The word Boston twice. Holden listened without interrupting. When Auberge finished, Holden took a slow sip of his coffee. "We won't be going to Boston," he said. "Sir, the bylaws require a quorum. They do not require a city. We'll hold the vote here." He gestured with the mug toward the bottom of the road. "There's a community hall on Maple Street. It has a working microphone and folding chairs. Tell the trustees to be there at 9 o'clock the morning after tomorrow." "Sir." "That's the meeting, Mr. Auberge." The aide wrote something in the leather folio. Auberge inclined his head again and stepped down. A small sound came from the doorway. Riley had appeared behind her father, one hand on the door jamb, the other holding her wooden comb. She was looking at the line of black cars with the calm, uncertain attention of a child who has decided not to be afraid yet. Holden turned, lifted her with one arm, and stepped back inside. The door closed without a sound. Cordelia stood in the middle of the drive with her acquisition binder pressed flat against her ribs. She watched the Suburbans begin to reverse, one by one, repositioning along the shoulder of the road. She watched Halpert walk back to his Range Rover without speaking to anyone. She did the math her training had been built for. The buyer her firm was representing wanted 12,000 acres of a trust, whose chairman she had just handed a notice to vacate. The supermajority required him. The vote in 48 hours would decide whether his trust survived. She had been hired, very carefully, to push a man out of a house. She had not been told whose house. She did not sleep that night. She sat at the small desk under the eaves of the Birch Inn, with the acquisition file open in 3 stacks. By 2 in the morning, she had built a chain of custody on a yellow legal pad. By 3, she had a name in Northern Ridge, LLC, Delaware, incorporated in 2021, 1 member of record, a law firm in Wilmington that existed only to file paperwork for other law firms. Behind that, a second shell. Behind that, a third. The cleanest part of the chain led to a private equity fund. The dirtiest part led to Halpert Development by way of 2 consulting agreements and a guarantee note. Northern Ridge was not buying 12,000 acres of conservation land. Northern Ridge was paying to get the supermajority deadlocked. At 6:15 she called Boston. The senior partner picked up on the second ring. He sounded like a man who had been expecting a different question. Sordelia, Walter. I need to know who Northern Ridge really is. There was a pause. She heard him drink something. That's not your file, he said. It is my file. I have my signature on page 1. You have your signature where I put it. She said nothing, Cordelia. His voice softened. It was the soft voice he used before he said things he did not want repeated. Don't dig there. Close the parcel. Sign the closing memo. Come home, Walter. Sign it, Cordelia. He hung up. She sat with the phone in her hand for a long time. Then she put on her coat and walked. The tiny house was lit by a single window when she came up the gravel drive at 7:30. Holden was on the porch with a mug in his hand, as if he had been waiting for a particular set of footsteps. He did not come down. I won't ask to come in, she said. I wasn't going to invite you. It was not unkind. It was just a fact. Laid down between them on the cedar railing, she told him what she had found. The chain, the shells, the senior partner's voice. She did not embellish. She had learned a long time ago that powerful men listened to the unembellished. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he set his mug on the railing and looked out at the spruce. My wife wrote those easements, he said. Helena. She spent 4 years drafting them. She died before she could see whether they would hold. He paused. Someone is trying to tear them up. The wind moved through the trees once, and then was still. I think I'm being used as the instrument, Cordelia said. I know you are. He reached into the pocket of his shirt and took out a folded slip of paper. He held it out to her without stepping closer. She took it. An address. Town Hall basement. A name. Mrs. M. Whitlow. If you want to understand, he said, read it from the beginning. She kept everything. He went back inside. Cordelia stood on the gravel with the paper in her glove. The cold had started to seep through her coat. She did not feel it. Maggie Whitlow unlocked the basement of the town hall at 8 in the morning. She did not ask Cordelia what she was looking for. She asked her one question. You have shoes you don't mind getting dusty? Yes. Then come down. The archive ran the length of the building under a low concrete ceiling, lit by 2 bare bulbs on pull strings. Maggie walked Cordelia past 4 rows of metal shelving to a section marked in pencil. Marsh H and Marsh HEE. The second initials stood for Helena Elizabeth. Maggie pulled a long file box off the second shelf and set it on a small wooden table. She started this in 2017, Maggie said. She was already sick by then, but she didn't tell anyone for a long time. She told me. Her voice did not change. She told me because she needed someone with keys. Cordelia opened the box. It was not chaos. It was the opposite of chaos. Every document was clipped, labeled, and cross-referenced in a small, even hand. Letters from Halpert Development going back 7 years, 3 offers to buy the parcel outright, 2 offers to buy out individual trustees, 1 offer that had not been an offer at all but a quiet sentence about a trustee's daughter, dropped into a phone call and recorded by Helena on a microcassette that was taped to the inside of the folder. Maggie pulled up a stool and sat down across from her. She knew he'd come back after she was gone, Maggie said. She built the easements to be the wall. She built this archive to be the proof. She told me, if a stranger ever walks in here asking the right questions, you let them read. She didn't say who the stranger would be. Cordelia kept turning pages. She found Helena's master list near the bottom. 12 names. Founding trustees and minority shareholders flagged as vulnerable, with 1-line annotations beside each: health, debt, daughter, litigation, cash flow. Her eyes stopped at the eighth name. Walter Vance. Cash flow. Approach 2022. She read it 3 times. The basement got very quiet. Walter was her partner. Walter was the man whose voice had hung up on her at 6:15 the morning before. Walter, Helena had written, had been on Halpert's list for almost 3 years. Mrs. Whitlow, Cordelia said. Did Helena ever tell you who she thought he would send? Maggie looked at her for a long moment. She said he would send someone good at their job, Maggie said. She said the trick was to make sure they were better at it than he expected. Cordelia closed the box. Her hands were not shaking. Her hands were steady in a way that was almost unfamiliar. She walked back up the basement stairs into the cold Vermont morning. The sky had gone the color of pewter. The line of black Suburbans was still parked along the county road in the distance, silent, waiting. She was not the bystander. She was not even the instrument. She had been the chosen weapon for almost 3 years, and she had walked into Pinecrest Hollow with her own dossier already written by a woman who had been dead for half of that time. She was crossing the inn lobby at noon when Devon Pryor stepped out from the alcove by the staircase. He did not look like a man who wanted to be there. He looked like a man who had decided he had to be. Miss Vance, 5 minutes. Devon, not now, 5 minutes. Then I leave and we never had this. She took him to her room. He set his laptop on the desk and opened it before he sat down. You're going to want to see this from the beginning, he said. He turned the screen. It was a folder. Inside the folder were 117 files, emails, PDFs, screenshots, notes in his own handwriting, photographed and dated. 6 months of work, performed alongside the work he had been hired to do. He pulled up the first email. Walter routed Northern Ridge's instructions through me in the 3rd week, Devon said. Small things, send a red line, push a clause. He didn't know I was the one printing the cover sheets. He thought one of the senior associates was. He clicked through. This is the consulting agreement, he said. It's not an agreement. It's a payment vehicle. Northern Ridge wires Vermont Strategic Advisors, LLC. That's a single-member entity. The single member is W. Vance. 8 wires across 14 months. $8 million total. Cordelia started. How did you find this? My mother is an auditor, Devon said. She raised me looking at payment structure. The first wire was the wrong size. Routine retainers don't end in 2s. He pulled up a spreadsheet, and nobody in the Burlington office expected me on this deal. They reassigned me 3 days before kickoff. I think someone wanted a body in the seat. I don't think they looked at the body. She looked at him. He was 29. He had a beard he had not quite committed to and a sweater with one cuff worn through. He was, on paper, the least important person in the room. He had been carrying the entire case in a folder on his laptop for half a year. Why now? She said. Because of yesterday. He met her eyes. He cited the subsection number. The man at the tiny house. That was not a man I was supposed to be helping push off his porch. She did not answer for a long moment. Then she said, pack a backup. 2. Keep 1 off-site. Already done. She left him in the room and walked back up the gravel drive in the dark. The temperature had dropped. Her boots crunched a kind of ice she had not learned to recognize. The tiny house was lit again, just the one window. Holden was on the porch. There were 2 mugs of coffee on the railing this time. He had set one down at some point in the last hour and not lifted it again. She came up the steps. She set the laptop down between the mugs. 8 million, she said. He looked at the laptop. He looked at her. Tomorrow, he said. Tomorrow. They stood on the porch. Neither of them sat. Neither of them spoke. Her right hand rested on the cedar railing. His left hand rested 4 inches away on the same railing. Neither hand moved. The wind moved the spruce, far off, and then was still. After a while, she went back to the inn. The community hall on Maple Street had been built in 1942 for victory dinners and town meetings. It held 110 folding chairs and a small stage with a curtain that did not close all the way. On the morning of the vote, the chairs had been pulled into a long oval around 3 banquet tables joined end to end. The trustees arrived at 8:30. Council arrived at 8:40. Reed Halpert and his legal team arrived at 8:56. Walking in 3 abreast as if the door were narrower than it was. He had brought 4 attorneys and a public relations consultant. He had brought confidence. Holden took the chair at the head of the joined tables. He wore the gray flannel shirt he had been wearing since Tuesday. He had not put on a jacket. He had a leather folder on the table in front of him, and a pen he had owned since he was 26. In a small back room with a closed door, Riley was sitting at a card table with Mrs. Whitlow and a plate of oatmeal cookies. They had a children's atlas open between them and were making up countries. Riley could not hear the main hall. That had been arranged. Halpert presented first. He spoke for 19 minutes. He had charts. He used the word stewardship 4 times and the word liquidity 9. He proposed a partial dissolution of the trust, citing fiduciary obligation, market timing, and a careful rereading of the founding documents that, by his counsels read, did not require supermajority for the proposed action. When he sat down, 3 trustees nodded. They were the 3 Helena had marked. Holden opened his folder. He did not stand. He read the first wire. Date, amount, originating account, receiving account, then the second, then the third. He read all 8. He did not raise his voice. He did not editorialize. The room got quieter with each line. On the speakerphone in the center of the table, Walter Vance's voice came in hot. He called the document fabricated. He demanded that the meeting be adjourned. He invoked his firm. He invoked privilege. The door at the back of the hall opened. Devon Pryor walked in carrying his laptop. He set it on the table next to Cordelia, opened a file, and pressed play. Walter's own voice, dated 2 months earlier, came out of the small speaker. The voice on the recording said the words "ensure the supermajority does not hold," in a tone that no firm in Boston was going to be able to explain away. The speakerphone went silent. Halpert stood up. He opened his mouth to say something that he had rehearsed on the drive up. Holden looked at him. It was not a glare. It was a look that had been gathering for 3 years, since a hospital room at Mass General, where a woman with a yellow legal pad had told her husband what was coming. The look went across the table and stopped at Reed Halpert, and held him there. Halpert sat down. The vote was called. Council polled each trustee by name. The motion to liquidate failed by a margin of 17-4. A second motion, drafted overnight by Marshfield's general counsel, was put forward and passed in 2 minutes. It referred Halpert Development and Walter Vance to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Vermont Attorney General. It suspended any pending acquisition activity involving Parcel 7B. By 10:30 in the morning, it was finished. By 2 in the afternoon, the Suburbans had begun to leave. They went the way they had come, one at a time, gravel under tires, headlights off in the daylight. The aide with the leather folio stood at the bottom of the drive with a clipboard, marking each license plate as it passed, the way a person checks dancers off a stage. The chief of staff, Auberge, paused beside Holden's porch long enough to set a sealed envelope on the cedar railing. "For when you're ready, sir." "Thank you, Mr. Auberge. It was good to see you, sir." He went down the steps and got into the last car. The tiny house was quiet again. The spruce did what spruce do when no one is watching. The air smelled like wet bark and far-off snow. Cordelia drove up the gravel road at 3. Her duffel was in the trunk. Her room at the Birch Inn was paid through Sunday. She did not know yet whether she would use the rest of the nights. Holden was on the porch. So was Riley, sitting on the step beside him, working a piece of dried grass into a small knot. "I came to say goodbye," Cordelia said. "I know." He went inside for a minute and came back with a plain manila envelope. He held it out. "It's an offer," he said, executive director of the Marshfield Foundation, the nonprofit Helena set up before she got sick. The board approved it this morning after the vote. The salary is on the 2nd page. The work is on the 3rd. You do not need to answer now." She took the envelope. "Why me?" she said. "Because you walked back up the gravel road last night." He said it without looking at her. She did not have an answer that would fit in the space he had left for it. She put the envelope under her arm. Riley stood up. She had finished her knot. It was a small ring of dried meadow grass, no bigger than a quarter, with 3 white aster heads tucked into it. She walked the 4 steps to Cordelia, held it up, and waited. Cordelia knelt. She took the ring of grass and asters in her gloved hand. "Thank you," she said. Riley nodded. She did not say anything. She turned and went back inside. Holden watched his daughter go through the door. For the first time since Cordelia had met him, he smiled. It was not large. It was not for show. It moved through his face the way a slow light moves through a window at 6 in the morning, and then it was gone. He looked back at her. "Drive safe," he said. "I will." She walked down to her rented sedan. She put the envelope in the inside pocket of her coat, against her chest, where she would feel its corner with every step. She drove out of Pinecrest Hollow at 4. The sky over the mountains had gone the color of old pewter, the way Vermont skies go in the last week of October. She made it to the interstate before she pulled over, parked on the shoulder, and read the envelope. She read it twice. Then she put the car in gear and kept driving south. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday at 10 in the morning, Cordelia walked into the corner office on the 42nd floor of the Vance Capitol Tower in Boston and laid a single sheet of paper on the desk. The acting managing partner was a woman named Pruitt. She had been promoted on the Friday after Walter's arrest. She had a coffee in one hand and a pen in the other, and she looked up at Cordelia with the careful expression of a person who had been preparing 2 different speeches. "Cordelia, my resignation. I was going to offer you Walter's seat, I know. It is not a small offer." "I know that too." Pruitt set the pen down. She read the letter. It was 1 paragraph. It thanked the firm for 14 years. It listed an effective date. It did not explain. "You're going where?" Pruitt said. "North." "That isn't really an answer. It's the one I have." Pruitt looked at her for a long moment. Then she signed the letter on the bottom margin, beside the date. "If you change your mind in 6 months, the door is open." "Thank you. It won't be open in 12. I know." Cordelia left the building at 10:30. She did not stop for coffee. She drove north on Interstate 93, and then on Interstate 91, and then on a 2-lane road that climbed through stands of bare maple toward a town the rest of Vermont kept forgetting on purpose. She arrived in Pinecrest Hollow on a Thursday afternoon in the first week of December. The snow had not started yet, but the air had the dry, listening quality of a place that knew it was coming. The Birch Inn gave her the same room. June, the innkeeper, set the key on the counter without speaking, and added a second key beside it. "That's for the foundation office," June said. "Holden said you'd be by." Cordelia drove the half-mile out toward the spruce stand and parked at a 2-story timber frame building she had not seen on her first visit. A hand-carved sign over the door read Marshfield Foundation. The paint was new. The sign was old. Around the back, on a ladder, a man in a wool shirt was reseating the trim around a tall window. He did not look down when her car pulled in. He did not look surprised. He finished the last screw, descended the ladder 1 rung at a time, and turned around. "You found it," he said. "Wasn't hard." "No, I suppose not." The door of the timber frame building opened. Riley came out at a run. She did not slow when she reached Cordelia. She wrapped both arms around Cordelia's legs at full speed, laughed, looked up, and said, "You're late." "Am I?" 6 weeks late. Daddy said 3 weeks. I said 6. "You were right." Riley nodded as if this had been obvious. She let go and ran back inside. Cordelia looked at Holden. Holden looked at Cordelia. Neither of them moved. The light was already starting to drop. Somewhere up the ridge, a single chickadee called and stopped. He went and got her bag out of the trunk. 6 weeks after that, on a Saturday morning in the middle of January, the first real snow of the winter came down over Pinecrest Hollow in the steady, patient way snow comes down in Vermont when the wind decides to stay home. It fell on the spruce and on the gravel road and on the roof of the tiny house at the edge of the woods. It fell on the sign over the foundation office and on the chimney of the Birch Inn. By 11 in the morning, it had laid down 4 inches and was still going. The 3 of them were inside the tiny house. The wood stove was burning birch. The kettle was off the heat but still warm. Riley was on the bench by the window with a wool blanket over her knees and a library book open in her lap. The book was about snowy owls. She was reading aloud, slowly, the way a child reads when she has decided the adults are listening on purpose. Cordelia sat across the small cedar table from Holden. There was a mug between them. There was, also, between them, the first stretch of quiet that did not have anything to prove. Holden got up after Riley finished the chapter. He went to a drawer under the bench and opened it. He took out a leather-bound notebook, the leather worn pale at the corners, and brought it back to the table. He set it down between his mug and hers. He did not say anything. Cordelia looked at the notebook. She knew the handwriting on the front cover without having to open it. She had read it for hours in a basement under a fluorescent bulb. "Are you sure?" she said. "Yes." She put her hand flat on the leather. He put his hand on the cover beside hers to open it. The back of his hand brushed the inside of her wrist as he reached. It was the lightest contact possible. Neither of them looked at it. Neither of them moved their hand away. He opened the notebook to the first page. Outside the window, on the lowest branch of the spruce, something white settled. Riley gasped, soft, behind her book. "Daddy," she whispered. "Daddy, look." The snowy owl sat on the branch with its eyes half closed, the snow catching in the long feathers along its back. It blinked once. It did not move otherwise. Holden did not turn his head. He kept his eyes on Cordelia. "I see her," he said. Cordelia did not know, in that moment, whether he meant the owl or the woman who had built the wall that had been holding back the weather for 3 years. She decided it did not matter. She decided both could be true. They opened the notebook together. Helena's first sentence, written in the small, even hand Cordelia had come to know in a basement in October, ran across the top of the page. "To whoever finds this after me, the work was never about the land. The work was about staying." Helena had built the easements to protect what she loved. She had not built them to keep Holden alone.